Okay, so in this video I'm going to talk about my top 20 favourite films from 1984. These are all in accordance with the release dates on IMDb. And again, there's no real right or wrong to this. These are just my personal top 20 favourite films from this year that came out. Just the films that I enjoyed the most. So that being said, I'm going to get into a few honourable mentions. I've got quite a handful, so I'm going to get straight into that. So first honourable mention is The Last Starfighter. Great sort of 80s classic sci-fi film. Next up, Princess Purple Rain. Not a great movie, but a good movie. The star of this, by any means, is the soundtrack. The soundtrack's just on point. Next up is Stranger Than Paradise. Really good Jim Jarmusch film. Next for me is Sally Field's second Academy Award for Best Actress, and that is Places in the Heart. Really enjoyed that one. Next up is Footloose. Stars Kevin Bacon as this dancer who sort of lives in this town where dancing and rock music is like really frowned upon. Next up is David Lynch's Dune. Not a lot of people like this film, but I thought it was okay. I'm looking forward to the remake though, the new version, because I love that director's work. Next for me is Paris, Texas. Really good performance by Harry Dean Stanton in this one, and I love towards the end the sort of father-son relationship stuff. Really good. If you've not seen it, check it out. Next is Children of the Corn. Sort of follows this town that where the children have sort of killed all the adults and have taken it over and start to run it. The actor who plays Isaac in this film is the best fucking thing in the movie. Really love that performance. Next honourable mention is Firestarter, with the stars of young Drew Barrymore. Feels like a John Carpenter film, this one, but I know he had some involvement in the early production. But yeah, just a good sort of thriller, this one. Next for me is Johnny Dangerously, sort of a spoof gangster film with a young Michael Keaton. Next is Electric Dreams. Very dated film with the technology in it, but sort of follows this guy who moves into this building. He sort of likes the girl that lives there, and he ends up buying a computer. And the computer sort of falls in love with her as well. Yeah, strange one, but very dated. So coming up next for me is A Passage to India. Great sort of period drama, this one. Next is Top Secret. Stars a young Val Kilmer. Sort of like a spoof spy film. Sort of like a precursor to Naked Gun, this. Next is Under Fire. Great sort of political war film. Next for me is The Killing Fields, also another great political war film with Sam Waterston. Next we've got Ron Howard's Splash with Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. Yeah, just thought this was a really good light-hearted film. Got some great effects in it for its time as well. And my last honourable mention is Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze. Sort of follows this town that gets invaded by Russians, and the kids of the town end up having to retreat to like the mountains and stuff, and then sort of get their shit together and come back and try and help the town. So yeah, they're my honourable mentions. Quite a few this year. With that being said, I'm going to get straight into the list. And so my number 20 film from this year is Streets of Fire. So this film, the plot to this film sort of follows like this rock band who get their lead singer. The lead singer gets kidnapped, and her ex-boyfriend is sort of like recruited to come in and rescue her. Great cast with this one, with Diane Lane, Willem Dafoe, Rick Moranis, and the late great Bill Paxton, who plays the bartender. Yeah, sort of reminded me of The Warriors, this film, a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next for me is Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. To talk about the plot of this film will sort of like ruin the end of Star Trek 2, which I won't get too into. But yeah, no, really good sci-fi film, this one. Christopher Lloyd as the Klingon villain as well. Absolutely great. Really, really enjoyed it. It's coming up at number 18 for me is John Carpenter's Starman. Stars Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen. So Karen Allen pretty much plays this widow, and this alien ends up coming to Earth, and it takes on the image of her dead husband. And the alien sort of needs her help to get across the country while they're being chased by the government. Probably one of John Carpenter's most underrated films, but I really, really enjoyed it. Really good performance by Jeff Bridges as well. So if you've not seen it, check it out. So next for me, at the number 17 spot, is The Natural. Great baseball movie, this one. Sort of follows this middle-aged guy who he's in bed one night and lightning strikes a tree in his garden, and he gets this urge to make this baseball bat out of a piece of the tree, and he sort of takes to the game like a duck to water. He has almost like supernatural abilities for the sport. I absolutely really, really loved it. For one of my favourite sports movies. Yeah, just really, really good. So coming up next for me at the number 16 spot is Revenge of the Nerds. I grew up watching this film and didn't think much of it. It's a light-hearted teen sex sort of comedy movie, and that was fine for me. Really enjoyed it, but there's some scenes in it that just do not hold up nowadays. There's a scene towards the end where one of the nerds has sex with one of the college girls, and what he does to me is completely 100% considered as rape. But it's sort of played off for laughs. It's creepy and it's weird what he does. Completely uncomfortable watching it now in today's age. But I know back then it's played for laughs and it's played off as really innocent. But yeah, it's I'm sorry, but what he does is rape. It's really, really wrong. But that scene apart, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the humour in the film. It's sort of really lighthearted. The ending to it is pretty enjoyable when they get together and do that. They sort of form this band at the end. The music's really good. Really good performance from a young John Goodman in this as the jock sort of coach. I really enjoyed him in it. Got a young Anthony Edwards in it as well, who's probably most famous from ER. But yeah, really, really enjoyable film. As I say, some parts of it do not hold up in the slightest and can be considered quite offensive nowadays. But yeah, it's worth checking out just for that scene alone to see how bad it would be nowadays. It was completely wrong back then as well. But yeah, definitely worth watching if you've not seen it. So coming up next for me at the number 15 spot is John Hughes' 16 Candles. I believe he wrote this film in one weekend, and you would not have guessed that at all watching it. So it sort of follows Molly Ringwald's character, who's it's her 16th birthday, and everything that could go wrong does go wrong on this birthday. She gets completely embarrassed in every way by her friends and family. Sort of every sort of teenager's worst nightmare to happen on their birthday. But the end of the film is really sort of sweet and really sort of heartwarming. And I enjoyed the life out of it. I loved John Hughes's 80s movies, as few as we got, but all of them in their own way are sort of masterpieces. And this is one of the first ones. So if you kind of want to see all his work, this is a really good starting point. I think he only directed like 8 films in his lifetime. Yeah, as I said, I think this was the first one. But yeah, it's really, really good. I really enjoyed it. So coming up next for me at the 14th spot is Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America with Robert De Niro. So this sort of follows a gangster during the Prohibition era in America, and then sort of 30 years later he has to sort of go back and discover his roots and face sort of similar enemies and trials and tribulations as he did when he was younger. I love Sergio Leone stuff, particularly the Man with No Name trilogy he did with Clint Eastwood. Just a fantastic director. Bit of a long run time with this one, but you don't really feel it. It flows. The film's constantly on the move. Yeah, really good one, this one. So coming up next for me at the number 13 spot is the Coen brothers' first film, Blood Simple. Sort of follows this guy who runs a bar, and his wife's having an affair with one of the workers there, and he hires a hitman to kill them. Not everything goes to plan, and things go a bit awry. Yeah, Frances McDormand's in it as well, who went on to become a sort of staple casting actress for the Coen brothers. And it's got that really good song by the Four Tops that constantly plays in the film. Same old song. It strangely shouldn't fit, but it does. The ending as well is very Hitchcockian, very creepy, very tense. Yeah, I love this one. Check it out if you've not seen it. It's really underrated. So coming up next for me at the number 12 spot is a science fiction film for me that's absolutely really bonkers, and that is The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. It's hard to describe this film because it's absolutely batshit insane. The cast in it is absolutely amazing. You've got Peter Weller, Clancy Brown, Jeff Goldblum, John Lithgow, Christopher Lloyd. So it sort of follows Buckaroo Banzai, who's this man of many talents. He's a brain surgeon, he's a rock star of his own band, he's an adventurer and a crime fighter, and he has a sort of following, a group of people he crime fights with called the Hong Kong Cavaliers. Yeah, just absolutely insane. From the cover, you can just see that like it's batshit. Just the samurai sword, the guitar, the pistol. Yeah, just classic 80s sci-fi. Hugely entertaining. I loved it. So coming up next for me at the 11th spot is Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah, this is like I think Eddie Murphy was sort of starting to get that recognition from SNL, and this was like his sort of one of his big breakout films. I think this came pretty much straight after Trading Places. the chemistry with the actors in this film are absolutely great. The two cops he works with, Ronnie Cox as his boss in it. As the Los Angeles lieutenant. So it follows Eddie Murphy's character, whose friend sort of gets murdered, and he's trying to track down the murderers. This took place in Detroit, and he travels to Los Angeles to meet to try and track down these killers that murdered his friend. So it sort of becomes a revenge film on that, and it has the Eddie Murphy quips and the Eddie Murphy jokes, and he's completely 100% the star of this film. Got some great action sequences as well towards the end. Great shootout stuff. Hugely enjoyed it. So coming up next for me at the number 10 spot is The Karate Kid. A film that was on Channel 5 a lot growing up for me. Sort of follows this kid who moves to this new town and is like with his mom, and his mom's sort of like they can never really settle anywhere, and he meets this girl played by Elizabeth Shue, and she has this jealous ex-boyfriend played by Billy Zabka, who just hates the sight of Ralph Macchio's Danny, and Billy Zabka's character is like a student who's studying martial arts, so pretty much can beat up Danny pretty easily. Doesn't really give him much of a chance at all. So Danny sort of then meets Mr. Miyagi, who takes him under his wing, and teaches him, starts to teach him karate. And he says the only way you're really going to beat these guys is beat them at their own game. There's a tournament coming up. We'll get you ready for it, and that's how you're going to beat them and earn their respect. And yeah, I've seen a lot of like fan theories about this film where they state that Danny's the bad guy in this, and William Zabka's character is actually the good guy, which kind of can work. That's sort of down to perception though. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thought it was it's a ton of fun. And yeah, I've not seen the remake. I tend to sort of stick to the original if the original's critically acclaimed. But yeah, definitely check it out if you've not seen it. So coming up next for me at the number 9 spot is Brian De Palma's follow-up to Scarface, and that is Body Double. Really underrated film, this one. Sort of follows this actor who's a bit obsessed with sort of spying on beautiful women. Sounds a bit creepy, but he ends up seeing something that leads to all these twists and turns in this film. This Hollywood setting is absolutely great. I love films set in Hollywood that are sort of like film noir films. This is definitely like a modern one of its time, kind of sort of like Blade Runner that was set in the future, whereas this one's sort of grounded in the 80s. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the plot because it would spoil it, but I absolutely loved it. Dennis Franz, who's also in this, who was in Psycho 2, and he's in Die Hard 2 as well. Oh my God, just one of the most entertaining actors ever. When he gets pissed off in a film, he can just act the shit out of it. Absolutely brilliant. I love that guy. It's a shame doesn't do more films, but yeah, hugely entertaining. So coming up next for me at the number 8 spot is a kids' fantasy film that I didn't really watch too much growing up as a kid, but I saw it when I was in college and I really enjoyed it, and that is the Neverending Story. So a bit of a story for me about this one. I never grew up watching the first one. I saw the third one on TV when I was really young, and it pains me to admit this, but I really enjoyed the third one. It's absolute dog shit. It's a train wreck of a movie. Absolute accident with no survivors, that film. Best thing about it is Jack Black's performance, because he's the only actor who really looks like he's having fun in the role. But watching the Neverending Story, Neverending Story 3 butchers the characters that was in the first one. Like, if there was a character that was intelligent or smart or wise, they're an absolute dope in the third one. Particularly with Falcor. But yeah, the scene with Artex is just absolutely heartbreaking. I'm so glad I never saw that as a child, because that would have just traumatized me. The music in this film is on point. It's fantastic. The visuals are absolutely great. Yeah, I just loved it. Just classic 80s kids fantasy film. Can do no harm. Hugely enjoyable. And I really loved it. So coming up next for me, at the number 7 spot, is a film. Again, another film I didn't like at all the first time I saw it, but the second time I absolutely loved it. And that is Rob Reiner's This Is Spinal Tap. A sort of mockumentary about a rock band called Spinal Tap. And it sort of follows their endeavours as they're going on tour and trying to write new material and come out with new albums. And all the mishaps that end up happening, they can never really hold a drummer. They just keep losing them, or they keep dying, or they order like stage sets that come out too small, absolutely like microscopic. The props on stage keep going wrong. Just like this hugely likable band as well. With you've got Michael McKean and Harry Shearer and Christopher Guest. Just the chemistry between them is fantastic. There is a breakup with the band that happens in the film, and then they get back together, and it has all those sort of cliches. It has the classic line as well about these go to 11. If you've seen the film, you'll know what I'm on about. Just a really, really good sort of comedy film that I didn't get the first time I saw it. It went way over my head. I saw it when I was at school, and it just didn't really do anything for me. But I watched it again last year, and it definitely earns its place higher up on this list for me. Just a fun film. So coming up next for me at the number 7 spot. No, excuse me, the number 6 spot. Spinal Tap was number 7. At number 6 is the best picture winner for me at this. It won Best Picture at the Oscars, and it also won Best Actor. And it was the last film to have its 2 main leads nominated for Best Actor as well. And that is the director's cut of Amadeus. So it follows the life pretty much of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who of course was this absolute genius at creating music, and this massively respected artist who had sort of like unorthodox ways, but this film sort of really dramatizes it and makes it a bit eccentric. So it tells the story of him and how he sort of had this rivalry with Antonio Salieri, who was sort of really, really jealous of Mozart and just didn't really understand how easily it came to him to create music, because he felt he had to put in some really, really hard work to try and create something decent, whereas it came naturally to Mozart. Just a fun, epic movie, and I loved it. F. Murray Abraham was well deserved of the Oscar. Both actors in the film were, but yeah, hugely entertaining film. Loved it. It's one of those films where you get like actors in it that you've seen before in other movies that sort of pop up. You know, Jeffrey Jones is in there, Simon Callow's in there. Yeah, hugely entertaining film. So coming up next for me at the number 5 spot. The top 5 for me are just like sort of childhood staples for me that I grew up with. So yeah, at number 5, you've got Joe Dante's Gremlins, written by Christopher Columbus, produced by Steven Spielberg. So the plot to this is basically this dad's trying to buy his Christmas present for his son, and he's sort of this inventor whose inventions like aren't always the best, but he's got a heart of gold and he means well. His heart's in the right place. So he comes across this strange little shop, and there's a creature in the shop called a mogwai, and he tries to buy it from this old man, and the old man's like, no, he's not for sale. So the old man's grandson ends up selling the mogwai to him behind his grandfather's back because he sees it as a sale, and they purely need the money. But he says there's 3 rules that you have to follow when taking care of the mogwai, and that is don't feed it after midnight, don't get him wet, and don't expose him to bright light. Of course, all 3 of these rules get broken in order for the film to work, and it leads to just some absolute pandemonium chaos that is just so entertaining to watch. When the mogwai eventually turns into the gremlin and sprouts other gremlins. There's an old woman in this who's sort of like a sub-antagonist in the film, and she's a horrible old bitch with a stick up her arse. And her comeuppance leads to an absolutely fantastic, funny scene. I won't dare spoil, but it's absolutely great. I won't spoil the ending as well, but it has a very similar ending to sort of E.T. But yeah, it's one I tend to watch around about Halloween and or Christmas as well. But yeah, hugely fun film. Yeah, delivers on the fun with buckets, this film. So coming in at number 4 for me is my personal favourite Indiana Jones film, and that is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So this film's a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I never knew. I thought it was obvious. I thought it was the second Indiana Jones film, the second story. But no, the date at the start of the film predates Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it starts off with this great scene at this restaurant where Indiana Jones is doing a deal with these sort of like mob gangsters, and he ends up drinking poison. They have the antidote, and it's a huge like I'll trade you this for this in order for this, and it leads to a very humorous scene. We then end up following Indiana Jones on this plane, and the plane flies over India, which is where the rest of the film pretty much takes place. Then he stumbles across this village who's have this sort of sacred stone that's been stolen, which has also led to all the children being stolen from this village that are now being used for slave labour by the sort of cult leader named Mularam. And the scenery in this film is absolutely fantastic. I remember as a kid seeing the scene where one of the peasants is sort of being lowered into this lava pit, and that absolutely sticking with me as a kid. Yeah, just nightmarish imagery. The scene at the end as well on the rope bridge is absolutely fantastic and suspenseful. You've got the carts on the tracks, absolutely fantastic, entertaining scene as well. I know out of the main trilogy, this is one's probably considered the worst, but it's my absolute favourite. I love it. Willie and Short Round can come across as quite annoying, but as I saw this as a kid, they never really bothered me that much. But I can see the argument there as to for them being annoying. You've got the scene as well with the ceiling coming down with the spikes, which is absolutely fantastic. You've also got a glimpse of Indiana Jones being sort of turned evil as well in this film, which is really unsettling to see. But yeah, just a classic adventure film. Huge amounts of fun with this one. It was of an era where Spielberg could pretty much do no wrong. But yeah, it's my personal favourite Indiana Jones film. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. So coming in at the number 3 spot for me is Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. As a kid, I remember trying to collect all the videotapes of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I remember when I was a lot younger than that, and I was in Blockbusters and I was looking in the horror section, and the cover that stood out to me was the cover for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. I remember seeing that cover and just being completely blown away by how intrigued I was by that poster and that film. Just looking at it. I hadn't seen the film at that point. The film's not very good, to say the least. But as I sort of grew up, I remember trying to collect all the VHS tapes of Nightmare on Elm Street, and the one I could not get for the life of me was the first one. I ended up watching all the sequels, having no sort of context as to how this sort of franchise began, because I'd never seen the first film. And when I did eventually see it for the first time, I just wasn't prepared for how sort of creepy and scary this film actually is. It is the best one of the franchise. It is the most competent, followed closely by the third film for me. But yeah, as I say, the murder scenes in this film are so creative and so nightmarish, no pun intended. So the film basically follows this group of kids that live on Elm Street, and there's this entity that sort of haunts their dreams in the form of Freddy Krueger, who we eventually find out was a murderer who lived nearby Elm Street and murdered a lot of children, who was eventually caught by the police but was let go because there was a lack of evidence to convict him. So the parents from Elm Street took matters into their own hands and ended up murdering him by burning him to death. And he sort of comes back through the new children's dreams and murders the parents that killed him's children. The first death we see involves Tina, who just absolutely did not deserve that death. It's horrific. It's frightening. There's also a scene later on, which for me is hands down the scariest scene in the franchise, where Nancy, who's the main antagonist, falls asleep in class, and we basically see this translucent body bag which has Tina inside, covered in blood, like sort of saying, "Help me, follow me." She ends up being sort of invisibly dragged across the floor. It's frightening. It's so unsettling and it's so disturbing. Film also stars a young Johnny Depp in his first film, pretty much. He has a really creative death scene in it as well. Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. No one else can play Freddy Krueger, in my opinion. As typecast as that sounds, the guy just nails it out of the park. Born to play it. I'll talk about another Born to Play a Role film at my number 1 spot, but Robert Englund was born to play Freddy Krueger. Just some really good underrated acting there. Great nightmarish effects as well in this film. Still holds up in my opinion. Just really, really good creepy. The ending, the effects at the end, not so much, but it does end on this creepy vibe. Hugely entertaining film that I enjoyed though. One of my favourite horror films. Absolutely love it. Check it out if you've not seen it. Another horror film to watch with the lights off as well, in the dark, on a big screen. Really good film. So coming in at the number 2 spot for me is a film I've got a bit of a story with, but this film is the definition of lightning in a bottle. For me, just has all the components of something that should be a disaster, but isn't, and works, and is just hugely entertaining. It's one of those perfect films that only really worked once, and that is Ghostbusters. The perfect sort of setting up a business movie, in a way. So yeah, as a child, I grew up watching reruns of the animated cartoon, and that to me was Ghostbusters. I had no idea that a live action film existed, or at least 2 of them by the time I was watching the cartoon. So someone told me when I was younger, oh, there's a movie, and I was like, there's a movie based on the cartoon. I was like, I need to see that. So yeah, ended up watching the film, and I was thinking, something didn't sit right with me. I was like, this isn't right. There's only 3 of them. Why isn't there 4 of them? And then it clicked then with me that the film actually was the first Ghostbusters property. The film came first, not the cartoon. So yeah, the film basically follows these sort of 3 scientists that they've got little to no money. They've been fired from the university pretty much. So in a last ditch attempt, they're like, right, okay, let's just start this business. We'll mortgage one of our houses, and we'll get the ball rolling. And it takes off for them. They start catching ghosts with all this untested equipment. And as I said, the film shouldn't work, but it does. It has all these elements. The cast, a lot of sort of veterans from Saturday Night Live are involved in this. You've got Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd. You've also got Rick Moranis in there as well, Sigourney Weaver, Annie Potts, and it just follows them and their business. And obviously, of course, you have as well probably one of the greatest movie antagonists with Walter Peck, who wants to shut them down, who's the sort of environmental officer, who is, by the way, 100% completely justified in what he is doing. Absolutely. Yeah, just hugely enjoyable film. The sequel's not that bad. I really didn't mind it. I haven't seen the 2016 film. Don't plan to. I'm looking forward to hopefully the new sequel that's coming out, directed by Ivan Reitman and son, who directed the first one and the second one. But yeah, just this hugely fun paranormal film that is just entertaining. If you've not seen it, give it a watch. Again, humour, it's subjective, but it's one that really struck a chord with me as well. There's also a sort of secret hidden cameo from Ron Jeremy, the porn star, in this film as well. But yeah, no, I absolutely love Ghostbusters. It's one of those films and properties that is sewn into the fabric of my childhood. Um, just grew up absolutely loving it. So that leads us to my number one pick from this year, and as I mentioned, this film stars an actor who was born to play this role. It is perfect for his acting abilities. He's not the greatest actor, but this role is so suited for him in every way possible. And that my number one pick is James Cameron's The Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. It's a hand in hand casting. It's perfect. So the premise of the film is basically two entities are sent back in time. One's a human, one's a robot. From their future, which sees robots sort of coming up and killing the human race. And they're sent back in time. The robot's sent back in time to kill the leader of the human resistance. And the human sent back in time is sent back to protect the leader. They're sent back in time before the leader's actually born, so the target is the mother, Sarah Connor. And yeah, this film is just absolutely iconic. The music to this film is just fantastic. It's 5 little simple notes that are meant to sort of replicate the heartbeat of the Terminator. It's just absolutely chilling. So yeah, the Terminator's sent back. Kyle Reese, who's the human, sent back to protect the target, Sarah Connor, who's going to give birth to this human resistance leader. The Terminator will not stop at anything until his mission is complete. That's the terrifying thing about him. Has one goal and one goal only. No one's getting in the way of that. And obviously the relationship develops between Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn, who's such an underrated actor. You really root for the two of them to survive it and kill the Terminator, stop it from carrying out its mission. Little bit dated, you could say. It's I love the music in this film, but it doesn't really hold up that much. It's very, very 80s, this film. There's lots of sort of characters in it with big 80s hair. The style of clothes are very 80s. But the story and the premise to the film are just absolutely fantastic. I love the flashback scenes as well with Kyle Reese when there's a flashback involving a scene with a different Terminator and how they used dogs to try and track them down and hunt them, and this Terminator just goes absolutely batshit and looks unstoppable. Really, really haunting stuff. And yeah, a couple of twists and turns in it as well. I won't dare spoil the ending if you've not seen it. 8 years later, we probably got one of, if not the best sequel ever made. I'll get into that on another video. But yeah, absolutely fantastic premise, fantastic direction as well by James Cameron. Hand in hand role for Arnold Schwarzenegger, born to play the Terminator. Underrated performances as well from Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor and Michael Biehn as Carl Reese. Just a great trio of actors in a film that, again, totally does so much and is so effective with so little in its arsenal. Just absolutely great story. The story is bar Arnold. The story is the star of this film. It's so good and so fantastic. That this is what makes the sequel such a good sequel, is because this first film feels so contained in its story. Like, once it's over, it's like, well, and if you've not seen the second one, it's like, how could they top that? It's so self-contained and it's so fantastic, and it doesn't lend itself for another chapter to be told. It wraps up perfectly, which again is testament to the second film. But yeah, as I said, it is fantastic. If you've not seen it, go out and watch it now. Stop what you're doing and just go and watch it now. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it, and that is why it's my number one pick. Brilliant sci-fi film from the 80s. Hugely enjoyable and entertaining. It's perfect. There's not really a whole lot wrong with it, apart from there's some aesthetics to it that are a little bit dated. Other than that, it's a close to perfect film, in my opinion. Some of the effects as well don't really hold up. The scene where Arnold's sort of fixing himself with his eye, you can tell it's an animatronic. That's it. That's all that's really wrong with the film. It's perfect. Props to James Cameron, who smashed it out of the park, not only once with this, but with the sequel as well. Fantastic. So that is my top 20 favourite films from 1984. Hugely enjoyable year, this one. Great improvement from 83, which for me just hardly had any films that for me I wanted to go back to and revisit, whereas 84 is just chocked full of them. Absolutely love this year. One of my favourites. Thanks very much for watching, and I should hopefully be back soon with my top 20 favourite films from 1985. Thanks very much again, and I'll see you soon. Take care.